Hey everyone, Raptorspank here. Today we have Metacheck January 5th. This is the show where I look at the meta and talk about a couple of decks I find interesting. This is a little bit late today, or a little bit of a weird episode, because normally there would be a patch today, and we still don't have a patch. I don't think we're going to see a balance patch to February, which is a bit unfortunate. Mostly annoying that they didn't actually announce that officially, but that's what they said in a roundtable, so we may have to wait another month, which I know is probably a pretty big disappointment to people who are tired of Go Hard, me included, to be honest. But um, either way, I'm going to do my usual thing here: talk about the meta, talk about last week's On the Grind deck. Although I didn't play many games on it, to be honest. But yeah, do a little bit of that, and then I'll go over three different decks that you can play right now that are doing well in the meta. So first off, let's talk a little bit about Go Hard Midrange, which was last week's On the Grind. Um, didn't play much of this. Deck's still the same as it is. I'll probably keep playing it if they're not going to patch it, because it is really, really good, and the win rate on it is really, really good. But I only played 2 games on it because I've played the deck before. I've played it a lot before. Played it last season, played it this season. Only played 2 more games on it, won both of them, which brings the overall win rate on the deck right now to like 85%. The deck is ridiculously good. There are a couple of things that have come out of the meta that are giving it trouble, and I'll talk about one of the decks that I'm still not sure where to put the matchup at, but Demasia's Shadow Isle Lucian Hecarim, we'll talk about that later, but that deck has been very close in every game I've played against it, but technically speaking, I am now 2-1 in the matchup, so it's gone Go Hard's way, but I feel like that's probably a deck that can do reasonably well against Go Hard, and that's probably why we're seeing a lot of it, but we'll talk more about that in the meta and with the deck itself. Just generally speaking, Go Hard is still really good. It's great into control, it's great into aggro, it's great into combo, it's just a really, really solid deck. There's things you can do to fight it, but the deck is still in a great spot, and I think you're not horribly unfavored into any matchup, to be honest. It definitely has its bad matchups, but as I said before, it is one of the best decks in the format, if not the altogether best deck in the format, and it's still done well, but I have not played it much because, to be honest, I really don't particularly love the deck and what it's done to the game, essentially. I definitely hope they will nerf it, and especially if we're going to be stuck with it a little bit longer, then I'm probably a fan of them just basically deleting the deck by heavily nerfing it. Maybe something like increasing the number of times you have to cast it to like 5 or something like that. But right now, if you are looking to grind ranked and all that, it is a great deck. It is something well worth checking out, well worth playing, and while I didn't play that many more games on it, I don't really think my win rate is that misleading. I think it's higher than it should be, but or higher than it would be if I had put a ton of games into it, but it is definitely a deck you're going to pull a fairly high win rate with. So definitely in a good spot, which kind of brings us to just the all-around meta talk. A number of decks have really solidified. There hasn't been any huge changes to the meta, I would say. We're still seeing basically the same decks. It's just Go Hard's gone down a little bit. I think people are kind of fatigued of playing it, and a lot of people are just heavily building to beat it, so people might be tired of that matchup, or the matchup of Go Hard into these unfavorable matchups. So there's that. What I've seen a lot more of is there's a lot more Lucian Hecarim than there was, and there's a lot more Zoe Lee Sin than there was. So I'll talk about both of those decks in a little more detail, but basically I don't think the meta is getting any wider. I think people are just getting better on it and starting to put in a little more practice on some of the decks and starting to really solidify what they want to play. I've seen some Fiora Shen too. I think we'll see that increase over the next couple of weeks, especially if we don't get a balance patch till February. I would not be surprised to see a lot more of that. It's definitely a very solid deck. Burn has gone down quite a bit, I would say. In my experience anyways, I haven't seen much burn, so it would not surprise me if that's kind of going out a bit. There's a lot of life gain in the decks that have been fairly popular, with the exception of Lucian Hecarim, but there's a decent amount of life gain, so it's a lot harder to win through just pure burn. Some people have been talking about Pirate Aggro. I haven't seen it a lot myself, but perhaps that's kind of rising back to the top again. I could see that being in a decent shape. I'll probably try out Bilgewater Burn again just to see where it's at. But yeah, basically just the decks that were good are starting to become a little more prevalent, and you're just seeing a lot more of it than we were seeing previously. And especially like the Lucian Hecarim list has been, that list is constantly changing, constantly in flux, and it's just starting to reach a much more big, wide-ranging popularity, I would say. But definitely the IT Zoe Lee Sin deck, which I talked about last week, that has definitely started to really hit its stride and settle into a certain pattern. But I guess we'll just go straight into the decks. There's not a whole lot to talk about in the meta, to be honest. It's pretty much the same as it was. It's still continuing on. So let's look at the decks this week a bit more. So the first deck off we're going to start with is Lucian Hecarim. I haven't talked about this deck yet, so I figured it was a good one to lead off on. This is known by many different names, essentially. It's kind of an ephemeral deck. It's kind of a Grand Plaza deck. It's kind of an aristocrat-y deck, but generally speaking, Ephemeral's a decent way to put it because Shark Chariot, as you can see, we have 3 copies of it, but we have 3 copies of that. We have the 3 Haunted Relics, 3 Onslaught of Shadows, we have Hecarim as a payoff. So there's just a lot of Ephemerals to this, and essentially a lot of ways to get them back and to draw cards off them. The big thing here is the combination of Haunted Relic / Onslaught of Shadows with Grand Plaza is insane. Haunted Relic right off the bat, those are now for 2 mana, 6 power worth of units on the board, all of which have Challenger. So you can set up all these really great blocks that can help you force damage through like crazy. And our late game's not even that bad because we have 2 Rekindlers as well as 2 Harrowings. So Hecarim is a huge threat, and they can't really deal with Hecarim that long against us because we should be able to get him back. And then Relentless Pursuit also lets us speed up our clock against certain things. Grizzled Ranger is 2 bodies for the price of 1, so if they manage to kill Grizzled Ranger, it's fine. Chronicler of Ruin has a number of neat tricks it can do with this deck, like triggering Bark Beast, or better yet, it can kill your Grizzled Ranger, bring him back. You only have another Badger Bear. You can kill a Senna or something to keep Senna, but also level up Lucian. Yeah, there's just a lot of really great value that you can get out of that, so that's really, really good. Although it's still not a core plan of the deck, so we only have the 1. But basically, against aggro, you're going to probably want to use Grand Plaza a little bit controlling, but generally speaking, we're never really going to be the control deck. As you can see, our only removal is 2 copies of single combat, so other than that, all of our removal is just Challenger off of Grand Plaza. But generally speaking, we're going to want to try to outrace them using a lot of our high value things. Stuff like Shark Chariot that's going to get damage in early, Evershade Stalker is good. Haunted Relic is pretty good into the aggro matchups because even if you don't have Grand Plaza, it's free blockers for fairly cheap, so that's pretty strong. And then hopefully Hecarim can close out the game. Against most aggro decks, they're probably not going to have a great answer to Hecarim, so we should be able to get away with it, but generally speaking, that's what we're going to look for in the aggro matchup more than anything else, is stuff like Relentless Pursuits and just great curves, or just the Senna Lucian combo to really pressure our opponent, because we can always use Senna to block, which will kill her, leveling up Lucian. Then we can use Haunted Relic with Lucian to ensure that he gets through and gets all that double attack damage in. There's a number of ways to go about it, but you just want to try and race them as fast as you can, because you're never really going to succeed at the control route. Against midrange, it's kind of similar. This is where Grand Plaza is going to be even better, and then something like Hecarim / the Harrowing is really, really good here, because Hecarim will eventually run our opponents down, especially if we have ways to keep bringing him back so they can't kill him for long. So that's going to be great here. But Grand Plaza is really good because the way it lets us force blocks how we want them, it can help us force a lot of damage through. So that's basically the big cards we're looking for in mid-range. And then into control, things like Harrowing, Rekindler, Hecarim, again, those are all going to be good. Grizzled Ranger's good too, because even if they kill it, we get something back out of it. Shark Chariot can be good, because we can keep getting it back every turn. But generally speaking, you're just looking for like a late-game Hecarim / Harrowing that just runs your opponent out. And that's one of the big values, is that with Rekindler and Harrowing, even against control, we have a lot of ways to keep bringing our stuff back. So if we keep running them down and burning out their answers, we should be able to still solidify a fairly decent late game with those cards. So, yeah, it's all around relatively solid deck. I think it's actually probably one of, if not the weakest decks that I'm going to cover today, but I think it's still reasonably solid. It's a really neat deck. It plays very different from a lot of things we used to see. It's definitely Grand Plaza at its best, I would say, at its most fair. I mean by that. So yeah, it's a neat little deck and fun to try. And like I said, it kind of pressures Go Hard fairly well. So that's one advantage to the deck. But let's move on to the second one, which is a deck I've talked about quite a lot on this show, many different times, over many different weeks, over many different seasons, but it's Fiora Shen midrange. Deck's still really good. People are still playing it a lot right now, and in fact, it's starting to really spike again. We've seen it move up some people's tier lists, up even up to like S tier and all that. So it's a really solid deck. Go Hard doesn't do great against it because there's a lot of things that can even, or it's not that hard for you to survive something like Pack Your Bags. You can use stuff like Deny to also shut them down, or Ruination, things like that. You can be an aggro deck, you could be a mid-range deck, you can be a combo deck that wins through Fiora. It's basically you have so many different ways to go about the game that's so hard for your opponent to deal with all of those ways. And there's definitely going to be matchups where certain ways of playing are better, but basically this deck can be whatever it wants to be. It's probably going to most often play like a mid-range deck, but we have that combo package, and even with the right curve, we can be very aggressive with stuff like Green Glade Caretakers and a Bright Steel Protector, and something like River Shaper, Fiora, and have like Relentless Pursuits to back it up and just run our opponent down quick like that. We can actually win fairly quickly, so that's a big threat to our opponent. So you can do that, but generally speaking, you're going to be a mid-range deck, and occasionally you're going to be a Fiora combo deck. So really strong deck. Against aggro, you're going to want a lot of... the mid-range plan kind of works, but Fiora is your best pickup here. If you can have Fiora with buff spells, extra combat spells like single combat, concerted strike, stuff like that, you can probably win against aggro with the Fiora plan more than any other matchup. So that's really strong. Early drop's also really good. There is a possibility to go for like a late game Spirits Refuge on something like a Screeching Dragon or Cytherea the Bold. That can gain you so much life that you're going to be set at that point, especially if you could pair it up with something like a Relentless Pursuit and get 2 attacks in with it. But all in all, generally speaking, aggro matchup, you want to look for the Fiora plan. Against mid-range, you just want to basically try to beat them at their own game. You have a lot of really great spells that can make things fairly one-sided. River Shaper keeps your hand full, which that's the big advantage you have over most other mid-range decks. As long as you can keep your River Shaper alive, you're going to beat your opponent in card advantage. And then, generally speaking, you just want to go for your big late game stuff. Most mid-range decks can't handle a Bright Steel formation, especially if you've managed to keep your board intact long enough to land a Bright Steel formation. And other decks aren't really running it anymore. We're basically the only deck that can get away with a Bright Steel formation, so slapping that down is going to be one of your best answers against mid-range. So anything that can keep your units living until that late game is going to be very, very good in the matchup. Against control, things like Deny are going to be great. River Shaper is going to be really great because it's going to keep your hand full of spells that can answer their stuff. Things like Sharp Sight to deal with damage-based removal, Deny for the Vengeances or Ruinations, Spirit's Refuge and Riposte work for damage-based removal as well. Your single combats and concerted strikes are going to be a little worse here, but you can basically look for some nice curve out into, I mean, a late game Cytherea the Bold, if you can keep that up with Deny, is going to be huge. But generally speaking, you just want to keep pressuring your opponent while saving enough mana to keep your own stuff alive and deal with what your opponent is going to be trying to do, because you don't want to let them run you out of stuff. So play a little bit safe. You don't have to be fast. You just have to be smart, essentially, with those matchups. So that's basically Fiora Shen. Talked about the deck a lot. It's still the same core deck. The list has changed a lot. There's more Bright Steel formations now. There's less Cytherea the Bolds. It's Cytherea the Bold rather than Guinevere or whatever. The Lawrence Chevalier, I've seen some people playing that a bit more. I'm not 100% sold on it, but it's something I'd like to at least try. But I could see changing that for like another Cithri of the Bold, but the heavy spell package, especially the Spirits Refuge coming in, I think is well worth it for dealing with burn and aggro decks. So that's just it's the same list as always been. Yeah, it's just a really solid mid-range combo-y deck. So from there, let's talk about IT Zoe Lee Sin, because I've seen this deck a lot lately, and it really seems that people are starting to lock in on the list. Big changes from the last time I did this is that there's no more deep meditations and there's one more Sparklefly. I just covered it last week, and that was the big differences there. There was one less Spell Thief as well, but generally speaking, this list I think is probably where you want it to be. Deep Meditations is kind of hard to pull off no matter how good that card is. And then Sparklefly is actually pretty phenomenal in the deck. Especially, it's great against aggro, but even just having another 2-drop there to ensure that you've got creatures is just really solid for what the deck is trying to do. So I think this is where you want the list to look. I think 3 denies is well worth it. Nopify is not quite as good as deny, so I think it's worth keeping the 3 denies to the only 2 Nopifies. This is going to have a slightly harder time drawing cards, but things like Spell Thief and Zoe can basically pseudo keep your hand full, so that's one thing to look for. But this is the Lee Sin combo deck that's been hanging around since the changes to Lee Sin. It's just that Zoe now makes the deck so much better, and she really does. She's such an incredible change to the deck. I mentioned this last week, but the amount of speed she adds to this deck and consistency is just really good, and it basically has transformed the aggro matchup with this deck. Is that you used to be really unfavored into aggro, but now the deck can actually hold its own, especially with the 3rd Sparklefly. But generally speaking, bunch of buff spells, protection spells, and a bunch of value creatures that can just really pressure your opponent and hopefully set up for either a Zoe or Lee Sin combo win against your opponent. If Zoe levels up against aggro, it's basically done. So that's what you're looking for in aggro. You're looking for a lot of early drops. Life gain can be solid too. But basically, your best case scenario is stuff like Zoe, Mountain Goat, Eye of the Dragon is really good in that. Sparklefly can be good. You're looking for units more than buff spells, and something like Mentor of Stones plus Sparklefly should cause so many problems for your opponent. And then a turn 1 Zoe can really take over the game against aggro. So that's your best stuff. You're not looking for the high end controlier aspect. You don't really need to go for the Zenith Blade combo kill with Lee Sin, for example. Concussive Palm can be good because it stuns one thing and gives you another unit, so that is good to run in the matchup. But generally speaking, a lot of early drop units. Eye of the Dragon's great, Sparklefly is great. Mentor of the Stones is great with either of those. Zoe is great for just hopefully getting you a lot of units and cheap units. Stuff like the Serpent can be really, really good in the matchup. So that's your ideal into aggro. Against mid-range, you're going to want to try and combo kill as fast as you can. This can be very hard into mid-rangey decks like Fiora Shen, but generally speaking, you're probably going to look for a Lee Sin plus Zenith Blade. That's going to be likely your most consistent way of winning the game, but you can try and stabilize to something like Eye of the Dragon. But Mountain Goat should be good for trading with a lot of their units, but Lee Sin is probably going to be your most reliable win. Zoe can be good, and Sparklefly can be good because Elusive is hard for most mid-range decks to deal with, even with Sharp Sight, but chances are they're going to have single combat, Concerted Strike, or some other means of killing your units, so it's going to be hard to pull off that. So you just want to go for like Lee Sin, Zenith Blade with Deny backup, something like that. Concussive Palm's great for stopping something huge and creating a blocker. Mountain Goat's great for trading with things. That's your penultimate thing you're looking for against mid-range. Against control, you're going to look to combo win. Lee Sin is going to be strong here, but basically you just want to chip in as much damage as you can over time. A turn 1 Zoe is hard for most control decks to deal with, especially if you can keep her alive through the later games, but you don't need to keep her alive. She's going to keep your hand full, but generally speaking, you can let her die because the big plan here is Lee Sin. You want to keep Lee Sin with stuff like Nopifies and Denies up to keep him alive, and as long as that happens, you should be able to run your opponent down. At least we have lots of protection, so this is where Deny is going to be at its best. Nopify can be good if it's a Piltover deck. You don't even necessarily need the Zenith Blade per se if you have just like a bunch of pump spells, stuff like that. Something like Mountain Goat early on can be really strong for running your opponent down. Spell Thief can be great here too, but you want to look for the combo kill and just try to keep your stuff protected as much as you can, because that's going to be the biggest way to win that matchup. But yeah, those are the decks for this week, so thanks for watching the video. There's a link for the decks in the description below if you want to try them out. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more videos just like it.